Okay. So Rabbi Marla will be teaching tomorrow. Hillel will help him set up the Zoom and all that. I don't think I'm going to be on, so someone becomes the host. Whoever's the host should should be able to mute or whatever. When I'm on, it makes me automatically the host. But if I'm not on, then I think whoever's on first. I don't know how it works.
I don't think that I'll be able to mute everybody.
Okay. You'll see. Someone becomes the host. Whoever's the host, it sets it up. Okay. Today we're doing Daf Gimel. And we're about 8 lines from the top. Tanu Rabbanan. Tanu Rabbanan. What is that? 9 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines. Okay. I think Hashem that we're able to learn every day. Most of our learning, we should have the basic English. Well, we're discussing the machlokes between Rabbi Eliezer and the Chachamim regarding if someone can divorce his wife and say that I'm divorcing you, except for, which means you're permissible to everyone, except for so-and-so. You still can't marry so-and-so. Now we had 2 approaches to that machlokes. One approach was that he says, on condition that you don't marry anyone, right? That was one approach. And the other approach was except for everyone. Two ways of understanding this machlokes was Rabba bar bar Chana, right? In the name of Rabbi Yochanan, I think. Who was this? No, it was Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. The whole machlokes is by chutz. Someone else says that the machlokes is by almanas. Said that. Let's see this again. The Gemara started off with the Ibayilahu. And Ravina answered that it has to be chutz. It means chutz.
Outside,
Except for. That you're permissible to marry everyone except for. That's the way Ravina understands this. And Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says that the machlokes is almanas. Okay, so it's a machlokes between Ravina or our Mishnah and the Brisa. That's really the machlokes, the way it's set up. Okay. Now, Tanu Rabbanan. Taught in the Brisa Lachar Petirase Shel Rabbi Eliezer. After Rabbi Eliezer passed away. Nichnasu Arba Zakenim Lashav al Dvarav. There's 4 sages that come in to ask questions on what he said. He was the unique opinion that held that a person can divorce his wife and have an intention that although she's allowed to marry everyone now, but except one person. That was the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Okay, so who are these 4 that come in? Velohein, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Reb Tarfon, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, and Rabbi Akiva. They're all approximately the same age, they're all contemporaries. Rabbi Yossi Aglili may be like a student friend of Rabbi Akiva. Reb Tarfon was a teacher friend. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah was a friend, and Rabbi Akiva, his generation, they're going to argue, ask questions on Rabbi Eliezer. Okay. It says he was a Levi, right? Is that what it says? He was a Levi. I think that's what it says. Okay, so it begins like this. Nenu Reb Tarfon v'Amar. Reb Tarfon responds and he says, again, we're talking about divorcing and leaving one person out from the permissibility of this woman. She's allowed to marry everyone except for one person. So Reb Tarfon says, how could that be? Let's say the person that the husband leaves out is Reuven. He says, you're permissible to everyone except for Reuven. It would be terrible for me if you would marry Reuven after this divorce. I'm not allowing you to marry Reuven. Well, so the wife goes ahead and marries Shimon, which is Reuven's brother. Problem is Shimon dies without any children. Now she's divorced from the husband. We don't know his name. I don't know. And she's now a widow from Shimon. What's the halacha? She has to do yibum and marry Reuven. Now there's a problem here. Is it not that the husband is now uprooting a law in the Torah by making her prohibited to Reuven, and now she can't do yibum? Obviously, this is not a real divorce. The Torah would never have allowed that someone should be able to uproot a law in the Torah. It must be that such a divorce isn't a good divorce. We're going to discuss all of this later. So everything is going to go back and discuss each one. And then Rabbi Yossi Aglili comes in and says, Heichan.
I don't understand. So she married this guy's brother. He died. It's not forced to do evil with the other person.
Yeah,
Maybe
but there is a mitzvah to do yibum.
That's a mitzvah to do chalitza or yibum.
Yeah, but yibum would be the main mitzvah. Chalitza is, if you don't want, then you do this.
Okay.
That's if he does want. Let's say he wants.
Her first husband.
Okay, but now it comes out that he's prohibiting what the mitzvah would have been.
His stipulations still stand after he passes away.
Oh, so one second, we're going to see all of that.
Good point.
Rabbi Yossi Aglili, he comes in, he says, where do you ever hear that someone should become prohibited to one person, permissible to other people? Where do you have this? You don't have this. Either she's permissible or she's prohibited, right? There's just, we never heard of such a thing. If she's a married woman, she's prohibited to everyone. If she's a divorced woman, she's permissible to everyone. Obviously, this is not how divorce works. We never saw anything like this anywhere else in the Torah. Then Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah comes in and says, Krisus, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Krisus, a divorce, being severed, is davar akaris beina is something that severs the relationship between him and her. If she still has restrictions based on her husband, her ex-husband, then they're not really divorced. He's still controlling the shots. Then Rabbi Akiva comes in and he says, Look at what's going to happen over here. Remember, he said, I don't want you to marry Reuven.
This could be any stipulation.
Oh, the one said, that's very good. Very good. Very good. Jonathan, excellent. Was it extra coffee today? Orange juice. Okay. So, the Malach forgot to hit you, when you were born. You'll see the Gemara is going to ask exactly your point. Let's say the husband says he can't marry Reuven. So she says, okay, fine. She marries someone else. She has children. Then she gets divorced or whatever, or widowed from the second husband. And then she goes and she marries Reuven, exactly the guy that she wasn't supposed to marry, which means that the original divorce that the first husband gave her was given on a condition. She just violated the condition. That divorce falls off. And now her second marriage with the children that she had were all prohibition. The children become mamzerim because retroactive, that divorce is all invalid. This is impossible. Obviously, you can't make a divorce like that. The first husband can't do a divorce like that. That should have this restriction that's laying on her that if she marries him, then okay. Rabbi Kiva has another problem with the ruling of Rabbi Elazar. Again, the Gemara is going to go through each one and say, discuss it. Harisha, he says, Shenesra of Kayun Mesa Megarish. let's say Reuven is a Kayan, and when the husband divorces, first husband divorces his wife, he says that you are permitted to everyone, which means regarding everyone, she's a divorcee and she's permitted. But you're prohibited still to Reuven. Which means to Reuven, she's still a married woman. Right? That's what comes out. Now, the first husband dies. Now she's now she's a widow. She's a widow for who? For the whole world, she's a divorcee. The only one person she was still married, she was still prohibited to, considered married, is only to the Kayan. So now she's a widow to the Kayan. She's a divorcee for everyone else. Comes out is Leinimtis Almana Etzlai Ugrusha Etzel Koladim. Turns out she's a widow for him and she's a divorcee for everyone. Now the halacha is going to be that since she's a divorcee, we're going to say that she's still prohibited to marry this man, even though for this man, the Reuven, she's only a widow, and a Kohen can marry a widow. But because she's a divorcee for everyone else, we're going to say that she's a divorcee and she can't. Now, the Kal v'chaimer. Now, if that's the logic, Ma Gerusha Shi Kala. For a Kohen to marry a divorcee is a light prohibition. It's a negative prohibition. He's not allowed to marry a divorcee. Asura b'shvil tzad gerushin sheba. Nevertheless, we're going to say that this fellow, this Reuven, cannot marry her because she's a divorcee, because not relevant to him, relevant to the rest of the world. She's a divorcee. So how is she allowed to marry anyone else? If because for everyone else she's a divorcee, she can't marry the Kohen, what about for everyone else? She shouldn't be able to get married at all because she's still a married woman regarding Reuven. And being a married, in other words, in relationship to regarding Reuven, she's still considered married to her husband, her first husband, before he died. Okay, and we're saying that she should be able to marry everyone else. But one second, if the prohibition,
Did she have a husband before the Kohen?
yeah, first husband divorced her and said you're permissible to marry everyone except for Reuven, which means that she has two statuses now. Regarding the whole world, she's considered a divorcee. And if people want to marry her, she says, yeah, I'm divorced. Regarding Reuven, she says, I'm sorry, I'm a married woman. I can't marry her. My husband never divorced me for you. He said he left out this person from the divorce. So one second. So according to Rabbi Eliezer, she's allowed to get married to anyone else. Rabbi Eliezer says that's a good divorce. The Rabbanan said, no, that was the machlekes in the Mishnah. But now Rabbi Akiva is coming along in his second question, and Rabbi Akiva is saying, one second. Let's say Reuven, the person that was left out of the divorce, is a Kohen. Would she be allowed to marry Reuven? The answer is no, because she's a divorcee regarding everyone else. So if regarding everyone else, she becomes prohibited to Reuven, so shouldn't she be prohibited to everyone else because she's considered an Ashes Ish, a married woman to Reuven? Shouldn't the marriedness of not being married to Reuven, but she's being married in reference to Reuven? She's divorced from her husband, but there's an exception in that divorce. She's not divorced regarding Reuven. She's still married regarding
Reuven's the Kohen?
Reuven's the Kohen. So if she can't marry Reuven because she's divorced regarding everyone else, right? Even though the husband died, but she was considered a divorcee regarding everyone else. Now, forget about the husband dying, but if she would be prohibited to Reuven because of the Gerusha part, because she's a divorcee, she should really be prohibited to the rest of the world because she's a married woman regarding Reuven. In reference to Reuven, she's not married to Reuven, but in reference to Reuven, she's still married to her husband. So shouldn't in the husband divorced her for everyone. Divorce means that she's permissible to everyone except to Reuven, which means regarding Reuven, she's still married.
That was a condition.
Not married to Reuven, but regarding Reuven, she's still right.
The condition?
Yeah, that she's divorced except for Reuven. She's permissible to everyone except for Reuven. So shouldn't she be prohibited to everyone else because she still has a marriage that's going on in reference to Reuben? Sounds like she should be.
No.
Okay. That's Rabbi Eliezer's view. We're saying the question.
A plus B equals C, but A plus B minus does not equal C.
Uh-huh.
Similar to the Sota situation.
The what?
The situation in Sota where she's not permitted to go with the suspect.
Right. Right.
Is it comparable? It's like she'll be free to marry anybody else, but except that paramount.
Well, that's a question on Rabbi Yossi Aglili that said, how do you define that permitted to this and prohibited to that? That we'll see soon. Here, we're just asking, Rabbi Kiva's just saying that shouldn't the aspect of still being married prohibit her? Just the fact that she's still slightly married regarding Ruvain, that should make her prohibited to the whole world. If that's the way it works by a Kohen, if it's sure.
She can't marry
Ruvain.
anyway. So
Right.
she can't marry Ruvain because there was a stipulation. And also she's divorced, so she definitely can't marry. So how is she still married to her? In a
She's
way,
married to her.
semi-quasi.
Why is she prohibited to marry Ruvain?
Because he's a Kohen.
To get the Kohen.
There was a stipulation.
Because the husband never divorced her.
Husband never divorced. Oh, he passed away.
The husband divorced her only for everyone else. For Reuven, he said, yeah, Reuven is not part of this divorce. Reuven, you're only permissible. Divorce means she's permissible to marry
You're only permissible to marry
to everyone except for Reuven. You're not permissible to Reuven, which means that the marriage regarding Reuven is still in place. So Rabbi Kiva is saying, if she's still married,
I didn't make that.
she's basically you divide the world into 7 billion little pieces. Okay, when she's divorced, 6,999 are become permissible for her to marry, and there's one that's still attached. Regarding one, she's still attached to her husband. When he says chutz, when he says except for, that means that the divorce didn't take place. Regarding that, in reference to that one person. Yeah, Reb Naftali.
I'm trying to understand which is the light and which is the heavy in this analogy. It's called
The light is that marrying a Kohen, marrying a divorcee is considered a light prohibition.
and the other is the heavy because it involves more people.
No, the other is heavy because it's Eishes, it's Karis. It's not just a negative prohibition, or more than Karis.
Okay.
Okay. So, obviously, this can't be a good divorce. Rabbi Yeshua says to the sages, Rabbi Yeshua was a contemporary of Rabbi Eliezer. He's one generation back. He says, he can't respond to the lion after he died. Said, maybe if he was here, he would have answers for all of your questions. There were 4 people, 5 questions, right? He said, maybe he would have had to answer. Amar Rava says, I have questions on everyone here except for Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. His is a perfect question on, basically, I have question on all your questions, which means basically I have an answer for all of your questions. There's a question on a question is an answer. And Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, his question is a solid question. I don't have an answer for that. Okay, that means that because of Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, we would disprove Rabbi Eliezer. Tanya Nami Hachi was also taught in the Braysom Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says, Reini Estiv Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah de Rikulam. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah's words are better than all of them. I see his logic better. He was the one that said that she has to be severed from her husband. And if she still has prohibitions lingering on, she's not really severed from her husband. Okay, Amar Mar. Now we go back to discuss each one. The first one was Reb Tarfon. It says, Nana Reb Tarfon bar Vamar, if this woman goes and marries not Reuven, but she marries Shimon, and Shimon dies without any sons, the is it not coming out that the first husband was uprooting a law in the Torah? Because she really is supposed to be marrying Ruvain because of the mitzvah of Yibam, the levirate marriage that her second husband died without children. She should be marrying Ruvain. But the first husband put a prohibition on her from marrying Ruvain. And so therefore, the first husband is uprooting a law in the Torah. Gemara says, Oiker, you Akar. He is the one that's uprooting. He didn't uproot any mitzvah. What does it mean? He didn't uproot the mitzvah. He wasn't the one that caused this person to die, that she should have the mitzvah of Yibam. He put a stipulation in there that ends up that it's being uprooted. Masna Mika Amarla. Did he tell her, did he make a condition with her that she was supposed to marry Shimon and then did he say that she needs to marry Shimon, and that should be and that's why now she's in this predicament? He just caused that based on what he said, and then what she does, it causes that law in the Torah gets uprooted. If that's the case, if you're going to say that causing to uproot a law in the Torah is problematic, a person should never marry his niece. Why? Because let's say he dies. His brother, who's his wife's father, won't be able to do Yibam. So is that what you're worried about? So you can't blame this person for what he's doing by the divorce, that now if she's going to end up marrying this one, it's not going to work out. It didn't work out. It's not, you can't blame him for causing that. That's okay.
Haven't we learned in other situations, if there's a problem with Yuvim, so they do Chalitza. It's not considered an Ikar mitzvah. It seems to me we've had numerous cases where the problem has been resolved. Saying, okay, they can't do Yibam, they do Chalitza.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Jonathan asked that. The Gemara's, I think the Gemara's means is that taking away that option is not in the lechatchila. It's not the way it's supposed to. Lechatchila Yibam would come first. That's the main mitzvah. If you can't do Yibam, so the husband taking away that option is taking away a mitzvah. You're right. Well, what we would end up doing is chalitza.
Seems like a person would only do chalitza if they're not prohibited by a stipulation, but more about like halachically. There's
right.
So is what you're saying that a stipulation
I don't know,
can
maybe
be
it's just not
said
the same
to
level.
not only come into action if this other stipulation happens? Somebody dies or whatever, that changes the situation. Is that what you're saying?
Me, I just think it's like a different level, because one's like the Raisa or the Rabbana, like some kind of halacha issue. The other is what someone else is stipulating. Maybe it's a lesser level.
Okay.
So that when the original stipulation was made, it should have been a little bit more. If this happens, divorce happens, death happens, whatever, then this is erased. Something else happens.
It means they could have gotten out of this problem by elaborating on those stipulations.
Making the right.
Maybe. Meanwhile, we're saying that the question that we had on Rabbi Eliezer, that in this situation, if the wife is going to marry Shimon and then she's not going to be able to do Yibam to Reuven, which means that the first husband that divorced her, with the exception of Reuven, that she can marry everyone with the exception of Reuven, was really uprooting a law in the Torah, or causing a law to be uprooted in the Torah. If you're going to follow that logic, you shouldn't be allowed to marry your niece. And we know the halach is you are allowed to marry your niece. Because why would you not be allowed to marry your niece? Because if the person dies, the husband dies, then the niece is going to have to do Yibam with her father, and which is the brother, and you can't uproot something from the Torah. The answer is that no, it's not a problem. You're allowed to do whatever it takes as long as you're not directly messing with the laws in the Torah. But that's what came out by. Okay.
More about the level of the halacha.
Yeah, this is just what came out because of the natural occurrence of the guy died, and this she was allowed to marry Shimon, and the Shimon was allowed to die. You know. Okay. The Gemara says you're right, Hainu Pircha. That's what Rava meant when he said that we have a question on Reb Tarfon. This is the question. Now the Gemara says, 1 second. There's one more detail that we need. Ubemai. Ilema bachutz. How does Reb Tarfon understand the machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan? Did he say that there's an exception, or did he say on condition? You can't marry Reuven. Did he say I'm divorced from you on condition that you don't marry Reuven, or I'm divorced from you and you're permissible to everyone with the exception of Reuven? So if he said with the exception of Mr. Shari Rebbe Lazar, then Rebbe Lazar would allow the marriage to take place now. She should be allowed to marry Reuven. Why? We're going to learn a new halacha, the Tanya. Rebbe Lazar agrees that if someone divorces his wife, he says you're permissible to everyone, chutz miplani, except for so and so. And then she goes and she marries someone else, which is exactly what she was supposed to do. And the second husband either dies or divorces her. She's now permissible to the guy that her first husband did not allow her to.
She didn't take the action.
Right, she exactly didn't take the action. So now she goes and she's permissible to him. So, excuse me. So if that's the case, then why are we saying that he's uprooting something in the Torah? It's not uprooting, he's actually allowed to marry. She's allowed to marry. Allowed to marry Reuben. Okay. Ela Balmanas. Oh, thank you. There you go. Rather, we're talking about Almanas. He didn't say that with the exception of, he said on condition of. And if it's on condition of, and that then the get is going to be batal, because once she's going to marry, that would uproot the whole divorce. That would still be problematic. Okay, let's go to the next. This was Reb Tarfon. According to Reb Tarfon, it's an almanas. Then Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Rabbi Yossi Aglili responds, and he says, where do we find that she should be permissible to one person and forbidden to another person? There's no such thing. So therefore, this divorce can't be possible. If she's prohibited to everyone. If she's permissible to everyone. Umar says, you don't have something that's prohibited to one and permissible to the other. It's like the children saying it's not fair, right? But you don't have that. What about truma? Only a kain can eat it. What about kachim? Only a kain can eat it. It's prohibited to everyone else. All the time, we have things that are prohibited to one and permissible to the other. The Gemara says, no, that's not what we meant. The Isser Isha Kamrinan, we're talking about with women. Where do we find that she should be prohibited to one and prohibited and permissible to the other? Well, it says 1 second, Varayarayas. You have that all the time also. You have close family members, a mother, a sister, an aunt, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law. You can't marry them, but everyone else can. If they're divorced or widowed. Everyone else can. So you see that it's prohibited to one and permissible to the other. There's no Be'ishas coming in. We're talking about when they're married, that they have to be prohibited to everyone. It says Varayashas Ish. That's not true. When the woman's married, she's permissible to her husband and she's prohibited to everyone. So you see, that's not a logic to say that it needs to be, everything needs to be like pig, like has to be like totally treif or totally kosher. So it's not how it works. In every situation, basically, you're always going to have that it's prohibited to one and permissible to the other. Where it says, you're right, Hainu Pircha. We said you had a question. Rabba says there's a question on Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Here it is. Good question. Ubemai. What was Rabbi Yossi Aglili referring to? Was he talking about that when Rabbi Eliezer said that she's permissible to everyone except for Reuven, or is it on condition that she doesn't marry Reuven? If we say it's talking about on condition, or you can't say that it's on condition. Why? He said, on condition that she doesn't marry Reuven. Okay. But according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili's logic, is she prohibited to Reuven? She's prohibited to marry Reuven, but she is permissible to have relations with Reuven, licentious relationships with Reuven, not getting married.
According to who was that considered?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
The husband divorces this woman and says, on condition that you don't marry.
Yeah,
you
they
don't-
could have relations without marriage.
Yeah, right.
Isn't
So, if
Bia considered like fiducian?
only if he has that intention. If he doesn't have that intention, then it's just zinus.
Oh.
It's just a promiscuous relation.
How do
Isn't
you
it-
know what someone's intention is? Someone's gonna say
Well,
it's
he would say that this is makes an announcement, puts a sign on the door. This
Isn't
is
the
not a
intent-
marriage.
Isn't the intention of the halacha all the way to the bottom? Let's see how many kids we can have
No,
without breaking any rules.
I don't know if that's how it works.
No,
I don't know if that's how it works. So here we would say, if it's on condition, then what's Rabbi Yossi Haglili's logic by saying that she's prohibited to him? She's not really prohibited to him. She's only prohibited to marry him, but she's still permissible to him with relations without marriage. Ela b'chutz. It must mean that according to Rabbi Yossi Haglili, his machlekes between Rabbi Eliezer is on condition, is not on condition, is except for, which means that she was not divorced from her husband in regards to Reuven. That means she can't even have relations with Reuven, right? Because she's still considered married. Okay. Then Rabbi Akiva. Now Rabbi Akiva comes in. What happened? Are we missing one over here? Rabbi Yossi Haglili, Rabbi Tarfon. Oh, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. Yeah, we're skipping it. Rabbi Akiva comes in and he says, if Akiva says, 1 second, I have a big problem over here because let's say she goes and she marries someone else, someone that she was allowed to marry. And then she gets widowed or divorced from this person. And she was children also. And then she goes and she marries Reuven, the person that she wasn't allowed to. Children is going to be mamzerim from the second husband, because she went and uprooted the original divorce retroactively by marrying the person that was in the divorce, a condition that she doesn't marry. So the Gemara asks, this is Jonathan asks, if every condition on a get, you should say it's not a good get because maybe he's gonna get married. She's gonna get married and then ruin the condition. Him to get bottle of an mamzer. Gemara says, okay, that's the question. Rava said there's a question on this. We found the question. One second. Gemara's gonna ask that. Ramai, what's the case? Ilim b'chutz. If we say that he said it's an exception, that you're divorced from me and permissible to everyone except for Reuven, then Mishra Shara Rabbi Eliezer, then Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer would allow her to get married to Reuven at this point. Why? Tanya, the brisa that we learned, that new halacha. And Moideh Rabbi Eliezer in regards to Shishta V'Amalai Reb Muteres Chladam Chutz Miplani V'Alchanis L'Slachet Min Ashuk and Sarman Eskash Muteres Zeshin Esrelav. That if the first husband says that you're permissible to everyone except for Reuven, so she says okay. She goes and she marries Zevulun, and then Zevulun dies. At that point, she's already permissible to marry Reuven. So what's the whole problem over here? Because she exactly did, she was permissible to, in other words, the new marriage takes over.
regardless if the first husband passed away or not, even if he's still around.
Right, and it's not that the first husband passed away. The second husband, the new marriage of the second husband takes over. And now when she gets divorced or widowed from him, she's now permissible back to Reuven. Ella must be Balmanas. It must be that according to Rabbi Akiva, it wasn't a chutz except for, it was an almanas. It was on condition that you don't. And that's the whole problem, because it's going to go back and mess up the original divorce. Davar acher. Rabbi Akiva had another question that he asked. So according to this, Rabbi Akiva, number one, is a almanas. Rabbi Kiva number 2 is Harisha is Eshenesel of Kayin. Let's say Reuven is a Kayin, Umesa Megarish, and then the first husband dies. Shouldn't be that she's considered a divorcee for the whole world and a widow for Reuven. She should be allowed to marry Reuven, who's a Kohen, because now she's a widow. The husband died. Originally, she wasn't divorced in regards to Reuven. So now that the husband died, now she's widowed, she should be allowed. And we say no. We say that she shouldn't be allowed to marry Reuven because she's still considered a divorcee for the rest of the world. And that's enough of a divorcee to make it prohibited to the Kohen. Now, if that's the case, Rabbi Kiva comes in and says, "V'kal v'chaimer, should have a kal v'chaimer, magrush shikala." If divorce, which is a slight prohibition for a Kohen, it's only a negative prohibition. Asura mishum tzad gerushin shaba, but nevertheless she's prohibited to Reuven because she's considered a divorcee for the rest of the world, not for Reuven, but for the rest of the world. That's enough. Eshes ish. So being a married woman in regards to Reuven, chamura, which is strict, like Kolshkin, for sure she should be prohibited to 6.99 billion people, because she's considered a married woman in regards to one person. Gemara says, "Ubamai." What are we dealing with here? Ilay mebal manas. If we're dealing with that, he said on condition. Ari grush esle biznus. He said on condition that you don't marry Reuven. So, what was the condition? Condition was that you don't marry Reuven. That was that you don't marry Reuven. But what about to have relations with Reuven? She's permissible. She's a divorced woman. She just can't marry Reuven. That was a stipulation. Stipulation was like that you don't go to Orlando. So, but she went to Tampa. So that wasn't part of the stipulation, right? So, on condition that you don't marry Reuven means that you don't marry Reuven, but she could still have relations with Reuven, which means basically she's a divorced woman. She's a divorced woman, so then she's prohibited to him because he's a Kohen. Ella b'chutz. It must mean that Rabbi Akiva here holds chutz, that it says except for, you're permissible to everyone except for Reuven. And that's why we're considering her a married woman still in regards to Reuven. And that's why she becomes a widow when he dies. She becomes a widow in regards to Reuven. The Gemara now asks, for Rabbi Akiva, ichutz svirle, what does he hold the machlekes between Rabbi Elazar and the Rabbanan? Does he hold chutz, lice of chutz? Then let him ask both questions on chutz, which means with the exception of. The almanas, if he holds that the machlekes is almanas on condition of svirle, lice of almanas, then he should ask just with on condition of. No, there's one question was chutz, one question was almanas. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Kiva shmile dikadamer chutz, bikadamer almanas, mandam chutz, hai pircha, mandam almanas, hai pircha. Rabbi Kiva knew that there were two ways of learning Rabbi Elazar, and he asked two questions, one to satisfy this one to satisfy that one. Oh, my pircha. What is the question on this last approach? This last approach where he says that it's a kal v'chaimer. She should for sure be prohibited to everyone because she still has a part of her that's still married in reference to Reuven. The Gemara says, we could say, the question is that how can you ask a question that how could a Kohen marry, that if a Kohen can't marry her because she has a part of her that's a divorcee, maybe a Kohen, the laws of Kuhn are different. Maybe that should be the question. Rabbi Elazar nami Mr. Kuna kamaisila. Where did Rabbi Eliezer get the logic that says that a woman could get divorced and still have one man prohibited to her? Because he quoted a pasuk that says that the isha grusha mi isha lo yikachu, that a woman that's divorced from her husband she should not marry, even if she was only divorced from her husband, but not permissible to other people. He still can't marry, which means that Rabbi Eliezer learns the laws of divorce from the laws of Cohen. So you can't tell me that the laws of Cohen are different, because that's where he gets it from. Gemara says, Rava that says that there's a question on Rabbi Akiva's question. He wasn't taking it from that approach. He was taking it from this approach of Rabbi Yanai in the name of a elder that says that we weren't learning it from a Kohen. We were learning it from the pasuk that even if she's just permissible to one person, she's already considered divorced. Okay. Amalam Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua responds. He says, how can you go and ask questions to Rabbi Akiva? Not to Rabbi Akiva, to Rabbi Eliezer after he passed away. You want to tell me that Rabbi Yeshua holds like him? But he himself asked on him. He says, this is what he's saying. I also have questions on Rabbi Eliezer. But we can't take our questions so serious, because if he would have been here, he would have been able to answer them. My Pirchad Rabbi Yeshua, what's Rabbi Yeshua's question? The Tanya was taught in the Bryce from Rabbi Yeshua. Rabbi Yeshua says, a woman on her second marriage has to be at the same status as she was before she was married the first time. We do a comparison. Just like when she was single, she was not attached to any man. Also, before the second marriage, she can't be attached to any man. Okay. Which means that this divorce is not a good divorce because she's still attached in one way, an aspect to Reuben. Gufa. We learned, if she was married to the first husband divorces her and says, you're permissible to everyone except for Reuben. So she goes and she marries Zvulun. Zvulun dies. Now she's permissible to go back and marry Reuben. Okay. The Gemara asks, Heshiv Reb Shimon ben Elazar, or maybe it's Rabbi Elazar bar Shimon, there's two versions of it. How does this work? The first husband prohibited her to marry Reuben. The second husband permits her to marry Reuben. How does he get the right to permit her on something that the first husband prohibited her? It says, V'loi, you don't see this? This is the first time. It says, what about a Yavama? The husband prohibited her to marry anyone, and the Yavam permits her. Like, in other words, the Yavam would divorce her, I guess, or do chalitza. It says, Hasam Yavam hu ka'asala. It wasn't the husband that prohibited her, it was the Yavam existing that prohibited her. The Imi Baal, Hashay V'kami, if it was from the husband, then she's totally permissible if there was no Yavam there. Okay, next case. What about a vow? The Noider of a Chacham Mater. The person takes his own vow and then the Chacham permits it. You see, it's not the person that permits it, it's the Chacham that permits it. It says, no, that's not true. The Chacham, the sage only permits it because the person regretted it. It's the regret that he has that causes it to become permitted. What about the woman takes a vow and the husband annuls it? It wasn't because of her regret, it's because the husband doesn't want it. He can permit it while she prohibits it. It says, over there, that's not because the husband is actually permitting it. It's because of what Reb Pinchas said in the name of Rava. Any woman that takes a vow, she has intention that she's only taking this vow if her husband would agree to it. So she's the one that's permitting it because her husband doesn't agree to it. Nana Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, his answer is that a divorce needs to be to sever the relationship. But over here, he's still holding on to her by prohibiting her to marry Reuben. Rabbanan, what do the sages say? Sages over here mean the other three sages or four sages. How come they didn't say this? It's a good answer. Hi, Krisis, my ugly. What did they do with the word Krisis? To sever the relationship. They need it for something else. Look at the Tanya was taught in a brisa. This is your divorce, but you're never allowed to drink wine again. You're never allowed to visit your father. That's the condition to divorce. That's not a good divorce because he's still holding on to her. He's still prohibiting her whole life. But if he says he can't drink wine for 30 days, then after the 30 days she's divorced. Where does Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah know this from? If he uses the word krisis to teach me that you have to divorce her in a way that she's totally severed from him, and that she's allowed to marry everyone. He says he uses krisis. The word could have said karis, but it says krisis, which is an extra expression of severing. Be'idach, what do the sages do with that extra expression? They don't use that extra expression to teach us anything. Amar Rava. Rava says, this is your divorce, but it's on condition that I never drink wine again. They were probably got divorced because he had an addiction. So she says, I want a divorce. He says, okay, I'll divorce you on condition that I never drink wine again. Means you're stuck now. So, ein ze krisis, it's not a good divorce. Kol yemei chaye pliny, but that I don't drink wine all the days of so-and-so's life, or is a krisis, that is a good divorce. Ma'ishna chaye pliny didil mamayt. Why so-and-so's life is he divorced? Because maybe that fellow will die, and then she'll be fully divorced. Or makayim tonight, then the stipulation will be fulfilled. Well, chaye didei, Nami, maybe he'll die and she'll be divorced. What's the problem? There is an end to that stipulation. The problem before was that never in the world will you ever, this. Then there was no end to this. But over here there is an end. He'll die. He says all the days of your life, that's not a divorce. But all the days of my life, or the days of so-and-so's life, that would be a divorce because they could die and then the divorce would be satisfied. Should I finish this? I think I need to finish because I don't want to leave Rabbi Marlowe in the middle of it. Let me do one more small piece. Rabbi Nachman. Rabbi asked Rabbi Nachman a question. Today, you're divorced, but tomorrow you're not. Mahu. He divorces her for a day. This is a question according to Rabbi Elazar. It's a question according to Rabbi Eliezer. It's a question according to Rabbanan. As Rabbi Elazar said, you can divorce her except and put an exception in there. She's permissible to everyone except for. What about if he gives her a divorce, temporary divorce? Over there wasn't a temporary divorce. It was 100% divorce. It was just not for the whole world. But over here, it's a temporary divorce. It shouldn't be a good divorce. He never allowed a temporary divorce. Maybe there's no difference between a divorce in time, temporary, in which only a segment of time, or a segment of the world. Maybe we don't make a difference. Okay. Now we have a question according to the Rabbanan. Over there, the Rabbanan say because you didn't actually do a full being severed from her, because you still are attached in one aspect that she can't marry someone else. But over here, you're 100% divorced temporarily. After he asked this question, he then answered, Mistabra, it makes sense, that once she's severed, it's 100% severed. And what we're going to say over here is that the divorce should take effect, and not temporarily, but it's going to take effect 100%. Because it takes effect temporarily, it just continues forever. Okay, let's leave it over here.
Can I ask a question in front of you?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank